I didn't forget to give him a bio the first time, I just don't always remember, that's all. The Vaike, or Teach, or non-British Ryan, as I like to call him, is the first primary axe user who joins in the game. And as you can see by his growths, yeah, Vaike is all about strength. That strength growth is by far the highest we've seen so far, and in fact, it will be a very long time before we see a higher one. Vaike has some of the highest strength in the entire game, with that +3 strength modifier, and the enormous base strength growth and major class growth there, having a whopping 75% growth rate in strength, so Vaike hits very, very hard. His HP is also one of the highest that we've seen so far. And again, remember that my HP growths here are 40 points off of what they actually are in the game. I had to do that to keep the scale on the same as the other stats. But just note that the Vaike's HP is very, very high. And his defense is also not that bad for a fighter. Fighters in the series, well, the fighter class, using axes, generally tend to have low defense. Vaike is kind of a bit of an exception because his defense growth is not actually that bad. I mean, 50% is pretty decent. He does have a fairly low defense base though, so early on he might be taking a lot of damage, but his very high HP helps him in that area. And considering that he already comes with the max HP +5 skill, that also helps. Vaike's skill, as well, is very, very high for an axe user, which is much appreciated because axes are generally the least accurate of the physical weapon types, so having a high skill stat is definitely beneficial there. And his speed is, it's decent too. I mean, 50 is alright for what he is. I mean, it could certainly be a little bit higher, but I mean, it could certainly be lower as well, so his speed is fairly decent as well, and he has a pretty decent +1 cap in speed, as well as +1 in skill. His luck is okay, it's kind of bordering on average, but he does have a -1 to the cap there, so it is considered one of his weaker stats. He has -2 to the magic cap, which kind of makes sense given that, you know, axe users aren't really all that big on mental strength. So attacking with a magical axe will result in pathetic damage from him, but I mean, that's really the only thing that affects. He doesn't have access to any magical classes. Thank goodness, because he'd probably blow up lots of stuff if he was trying to be a mage. The main flaw that Vaike has is, you can probably tell, that growth right at the bottom there, resistance. I'll say this now, Vaike actually has the single worst resistance growth in the entire game, having only a 5 base growth in resistance. Yes, I've checked it against everyone, that is in fact the worst resistance in the entire game. So, keep Vaike very far away from enemy mages. I mean, they've got low defense and axes are very powerful, so if Vaike can one-shot the mages, that's good. If he can't, he's going to be in for a world of pain. So, again, if he's going after mages, make sure he one-shots them. Also, he won't appreciate mages trying to attack him from a distance as well, because yeah, just don't let him get mobbed by magic users, because, yeah, -2 resistance cap and the worst resistance growth in the entire game, combined with a base resistance of 0 at level 3, Vaike really doesn't like magic. So overall, stat-wise, Vaike is pretty much all about power, but he has a decent complement of skill and speed to back it up, so he makes for a great physical user and probably one of the best axe users in the series, especially with that decent defense as well. Just keep him very far away from magic. Teach's class options also lean generally more towards power. He starts off in the fighter class, which gives him the HP +5 skill, which might be a bit more useful than many others, because 5 extra hit points is a really big deal early in the game. I mean, a really big deal. And it can, later in the game, break his HP cap and give him a potential 85 in HP, not just 80, so it's actually kind of alright. Then he gets the skill Zeal, which gives critical +5. Really, I don't think this is worth wasting a skill slot on. I mean, it's an okay boost early in the game, but by the time you have it, your skill stat alone is probably providing more of a boost to critical than that skill ever will, so it's more annoying on early game enemies than it is on playable characters, so I'm not really a big fan of that skill. Fighter can promote to either Warrior or Hero. Both of these will give him an extra weapon type, but both have their own advantages and disadvantages. Warrior focuses more on brute strength, and it gives him access to bows, which helps him utterly demolish enemy Pegasus Knights or Wyvern Riders. It also gives him the Rally Strength skill, which Rally Strength is interesting because it's actually male exclusive, and in my opinion, probably one of the better male exclusive skills in the game. And plus 5 strength on everyone within 3 spaces is definitely a pretty decent boost to give, so it's actually pretty good as far as the rally skills go. The next skill is Counter. This skill is infamous among players of this game. The thing about Counter is, I'll just sum it up right here. Counter is immensely frustrating when the enemies have it. When you have it, it's actually mediocre at best. It's got a major buff since Path of Radiance, where it was one of the worst skills in the entire game. So it always activates now, and it always returns the full amount of damage that you took from an enemy attack back to them. While this sounds good on paper, the problem here is that for playable characters, 1, you're probably not going to be taking all that much damage anyway. 2, in a game with permanent death, you don't want your characters to be taking lots of damage, and the counter skill is really best when you are letting yourself take lots of damage. And 3, again, because this is a game with permanent death, or at least severe consequences for losing all your HP on casual mode, having to sit out the entire chapter, your characters are far, 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 far less expendable than enemies are. Now, enemies with counter, oh boy, that's a whole different story, but we'll talk about them later. For Vaike, though, I'll just say that while counter is an okay skill, it's much better when enemies have it than when you have it. The other class option from Fighter is Hero. Hero is generally considered part of the mercenary line, so we'll give him access to swords as well, so it's all about physical damage. Hero, though, specializes in more of a balanced approach of strength, defense, skill, and speed. It's kind of a halfway point between a swordmaster and, let's say, a warrior or a general, the more power-oriented but slower classes. It also has some very decent skills, though. Soul, picked up at level 5, is an excellent activation skill, and it's one of the few that Vaike gets, and seriously, healing yourself by half the damage you do to the enemy with Vaike's massive HP, that can be really useful, and considering that Vaike is a lot more defensive than most axe users are, definitely a good skill to have. Then there's also Axe Breaker, which gives you plus 50 accuracy and evasion against enemy axe users. So, definitely another good skill for Vaike, because, well, those skills are always useful, and with Vaike always in the thick of things, and axe users are quite a common enemy type, so that's definitely a good skill to have access to. Now, Vaike's other class option is Barbarian. At first glance, Barbarian seems very, very similar to the Fighter class. It doesn't really seem like there's all that much different. I mean, both are axe users specializing very much in strength and HP. The differences between them are a bit more subtle. Barbarian, compared to Fighter, sacrifices defense and a bit of skill for slightly more HP and speed. So, it's a bit more directly offensive than Fighter is. Now, in earlier games, Barbarians, or Bandits, or whatever, the class keeps changing its name, basically. It's either Bandit or Barbarian. In earlier games, they could cross mountains more easily than other unit types. I'm not sure if that's still true in Awakening, actually, so if someone could confirm that for me, that would be good. But there are a couple of skills to be gained from this class, and I don't find them to be all that great. Despoil is a very bizarre skill. Basically, it means that every time you kill an enemy, there is a slight chance of you getting a bar of gold from them that can sell for a small amount of money. There are much more effective ways to grind money in this game than using that skill, and Vaike doesn't exactly have the best luck stat to take advantage of it. The percentage chance of getting gold from the enemy depends on your luck stat, by the way. It's okay, but there are better methods of money grinding, and there are better skills in the game. Speaking of skills in the game, there are better ones then. Gamble. It's not quite as good as it was in Path of Radiance. It only gives a, basically, -5 penalty to hit rate, but +10 to critical. While -5 to hit rate isn't actually that big a deal, all things considered, +10 critical on one skill is generally not really worth wasting a skill slot on. I mean, you could combine it with another skill that he learns from Berserker, but even then, I still don't think this is that great of a skill, and plus 10 critical isn't really that big a deal later on in the game. Now, Barbarian can promote to Warrior just like Fighter, but it can also promote to Berserker. And something a little weird about this, if you look at those pictures of Vaike there, you'll notice that for some very bizarre reason, Vaike seems to lose a lot of muscle mass when he promotes to Berserker, which is very weird. Anyway though, Berserker pretty much carries on the specialties of Barbarian, having more HP and speed than fighters, but less defense. And it learns a few interesting skills. Wrath is, in my opinion, one of the better male-exclusive skills in the game. It's not as big an effect as it was in earlier games in the series though. It still requires you to have half HP or less, but it's only a plus 20 to critical. You can stack this with Gamble and Zeal, but Zeal is definitely not worth a skill slot. Gamble maybe for the total plus 30 to critical. Again, this skill is better with things like Vengeance and Vantage, but even then, Wrath on its own is not a bad option, especially since Vaike can quite easily regain that lost HP with Soul. The other skill that he learns from Berserker is Axe Fair. Definitely a good skill for Vaike to pick up. Plus 5 to strength whenever you're armed with an axe, considering how many of his class options can use axes, definitely very, very useful for him. Overall though, the weird thing is, personally, I believe Berserkers in this game to be the worst they have ever been in the series. And here's why. Earlier games in the series gave Berserkers a flat bonus to critical rate all the time, making them incredibly powerful. Now, not only have they lost that, which, I mean, they do have Wrath to make up for it, but still, I mean, previously they had a plus 15 or plus 20 to critical all the time, so basically permanent Wrath. But the thing is, in this game, they actually have one of the lowest skill caps out of any class, and that means, ironically enough, for a class that used to specialize in criticals, they actually have some of the lowest critical rates of any class now, which is actually kind of sad. I really don't like Berserkers in this game. I honestly think they're really bad here. But their skills can be interesting, especially Axe Fair. Vaike's other class option is, weirdly enough, Thief. Now, this actually references his backstory. He used to grow up in the slums, basically, so he used to steal for a living. But as a class itself, it'll give him massive increases to skill and speed, but it'll sacrifice quite a bit of strength. That being said, Vaike as a thief still has ridiculously high strength. In fact, as an assassin, he'll still have 75% in strength, just the same as he will in fighter, so yeah, if you want a thief that hits extremely hard, definitely give Vaike a look. The thief class is mostly notable for the skills it learns. Lock Touch, the first thing that thieves get, in fact, it's automatic when you reclass to thief, lets you open locks at any time without the need for keys. You might know that in earlier games you had to use lockpicks for this. Now, in this game, lockpicking is tied to a skill. The awesome thing about this, you can use this skill no matter what class you have. If you get this skill from the Thief class, you get to use it in any of your other classes, which means that basically you can have Vaike as a massive warrior, dishing out ridiculous amounts of damage, and still being able to pick locks. It's really amazing, and I really love the way this skill works in this game. It's definitely worth it to have someone with Lock Touch in your team at all times later in the game, because you never know when treasure chests will appear on maps. The other skill from Thief is Movement +1, which is one of the best out of all of the Stat Plus skills, because +1 movement makes a huge deal of difference. It can be the difference between reaching a critical enemy and taking it out before it can kill someone, and, well, not, and losing someone, so a very, very good skill. And as a thief, it also helps reach treasure chests before enemy thieves can. Thieves can also promote to the, like I've said before, amazing Assassin class, giving them access to lethality, which, I mean, Vaike is already lethal enough as it is, but having a chance of an instant kill on top of his already massive damage is still... I mean, it's overkill, really, but it's the fun kind of overkill. And Pass, which, I mean, it's alright. I mean, he can... Vaike doesn't exactly really benefit from this as much as some other characters do, but it's always a good skill to have. Now, the other potential promotion from Thief, I would very much not recommend making Vaike one. Trickster. Trickster is a class that uses both swords and healing staves. See the problem with that? Yeah, Vaike's magic is absolutely horrible, so if you make him a Trickster, really it's only for the skills you get out of it. Vaike is an absolutely terrible healer, so really, really bad to make him this class if you're actually going for, you know, having a decent... I mean, if you want a trickster who can actually heal well, Vaike's not your man. But a few interesting skills from this. Lucky 7, which increases accuracy and evasion by 20 for every turn up until the 7th. It's basically a better version of Quick Burn and Slow Burn, much more useful than either of them, and it's actually pretty useful overall since 7 turns is quite a long time, so you'll often have this skill active for most of the battle. The other one is Acrobat. Now, this skill is one that at first I thought wouldn't be too useful, but then I played some of the DLC maps and realized just how annoying it can be to go up against. Acrobat means that all terrain requires one space to move across. Basically, the movement cost of all terrain is eliminated, and you can cross any terrain at the same speed you can open ground. Originally, I thought, why would you really want this? It's not all that useful. I mean, you can just go through forests faster, maybe go through mountains a bit, but mountains are really rare. Then I played Lost Bloodlines. Then I ran into Leif from Lost Bloodlines, and realized that he can cross an entire river in one turn. Yeah, this skill lets you walk on water. In some maps, this can open up a massive amount of new strategies and attack avenues. It's actually a far better skill than I ever gave it credit for, so it's definitely highly recommended overall. But really, once you've learned that skill from Trickster, reclass Vaike out of that immediately, because he's terrible in that class. Definitely stick with the more offensive classes. Warrior, Hero, and even Assassin, he's actually not bad as that. So on to voice actor trivia. Vaike's voice actor isn't as well known as some of the other members of the cast, but in looking him up I actually found that he'd done a surprising amount of interesting roles. He's voiced by Michael Sorik. Now, in terms of recent games, you might have heard him as Barbarossa the Pirate in Bravely Default, another loud axe user. He's also Gen in Street Fighter, but the main role that was the most interesting to me is one that is actually from quite a while ago. He played Edward Van Helgen in The Curse of Monkey Island. I haven't actually played this game, but I really need to. I'm a really big fan of the Monkey Island series, and I actually had no idea that Vaike's voice actor played this guy. He's one of the characters who sings a pirate I was meant to be. So that's pretty amazing. Let's just take a moment to appreciate the fact that this voice actor has had a lot of experience voicing pirates, and yet there is no pirate class in Awakening.